Cool. All right. Welcome everybody to Visionary Blueprint Podcast. We have a very special online exclusive event today. This is actually a live webinar that we are doing. So if you're catching it later, awesome. We do have people joining us live. We have a very special guest today, Deevo Tindall, who is a brand strategist, architect, and entrepreneur. He is going to be sharing some of his tools of how to beef up your branding in your business. And this is very exciting. It's also part two of our branding series. So welcome everybody to Brand Like a Visionary. Devo, if you want to take it away.
Thank you for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. So, did you want me to elaborate on what I do? Is that what the next step was here?
Yes,
So
please.
I am I have a serial entrepreneur. I've been doing this serial entrepreneur game. I'm an ex-corporate refugee. I worked straight out of college, as do many entrepreneurs in New York City. First, I was working for a large multi-international bank, and I got put into this executive development program for 2 years, where I was basically sent on all these different posits throughout the world to work in different divisions of the company, because the idea was go through the program, find where it's a good fit for him, and then put him into a placement. So I did that for a year and a half. I graduated early, and they sent me back out to San Diego, where I was basically in charge of taking over a company that was a mostly male audience, antithetical to this, and mostly an aging audience, and mostly just using zero technology and mostly paper based. And so this was sort of at the advent of internet was just coming online, and real technology and cell phones were just relatively kind of new. I just aged myself. And my job was basically to bring this company into the 21st century. And so I spent 15 years working primarily in operations and marketing and branding, which they didn't call it branding back then. It was just sort of like how to get your message out to the right people. So I did that for 15 years. About 10 years into that, I started realizing this is not something I want to do the rest of my life, as most entrepreneurs will have this epiphany. And so I started looking for ways that I could get back to my creative self, and photography was something I'd always done. So I started moonlighting. I'd worked my 9 to 5, which was really like 6 to 8, and then I would come home and I'd literally just basically pimp myself out. I'm sorry for the reference, but to anybody and everybody who would take me on to take photography for them. And I was literally shooting, you name it. And I was just doing this all free of charge. And so that's how I sort of got into my first stake of content creation for business and that sort of area. So fast forward to today, I now own one of the largest photography studios in Charlotte. I still own that business, but I've been morphing over the last 5 years from less traditional photography to more branding content, and working with corporations and entrepreneurs and individuals to really help them tell their stories. So that's where I am today. I guess my primary, I'm a storyteller at heart, a creative at heart. But because I have a lot of business experience, I've been able to figure out a way to sort of use my left brain and my right brain and create my little business over here. So that's kind of where we are today.
I feel like, thank you, number one, for sharing that. I feel like that is very similar to everybody's entrepreneurial
Yeah.
story, like you said. Um, cool. We're just gonna dive right into the questions. In your opinion, what truly makes a brand unforgettable in today's oversaturated market?
Well, one of you said something, I think it was Casey that said something at the beginning in the green room, is this whole idea of emotions. And I think a lot of people don't realize how powerful emotional connectivity is. So, if I can sort of digress for a second, if you think about the relationships that you've built in your personal life, whether it be your partners, whether it be your best friends, whether it be just anybody who you connect with, collaborations, it all centers around some sort of common bond that you establish with them, right? So whether it's you like how they dress, or you like how they make you feel, or they're very complimentary, there's something energetically going on when you connect with people. And so all of that really centers around this idea of this emotional chord that really kind of tugs at your heartstrings, right? So, and then if you kind of transpose that into brands that you work with, what are the things that you really love, whether it be Lululemon, whether it be Stanley, whether it be a type of restaurant that you go to, there's always some, if you really stop and reflect about it, there's always some emotional draw that brings you back to use the product over and over again, or brings you back to the restaurant. In my case, I love going to restaurants where they remember me and makes me feel like a celebrity or a VIP, and like, oh, Devo, it's good to see you again. Welcome back. They know where I like to sit. They know that generally they know if I like what I like to drink, and it just makes you sort of feel really important, right? And if you stop and kind of think about what that important factor is, it's really this emotional connection that people do. So, just a perfect example of this. I don't know if you guys saw Liquid Death. I think they just got valuated at $1 billion. And basically this is tap water in a bottle, right? And so the founders of this company said, okay, what's a commodity that everybody needs? And let's reframe that and reverse engineer that so that we can make this really unique concept for everybody. So they're like, we need a really cool name. So they came up with this rebellious, like, we're gonna be rebels in the water industry. And it's really literally just tap water in a bottle. Like by and large, that's basically, in fact, I saw a story the other day that 70% of bottled water is literally just tap water. So somebody has taken this idea of water, put it in a bottle, did some really cool emotional branding to it, and then is now selling it to people. And in their case, they were just valued at $1 billion. And so, to answer your question, long and short of that is that brands that win aren't necessarily the louder brands per se, because you can do this. You can create your own liquid death in your own little microcosm market, right? It's the ones that sort of understand and lead with first, and you're going to hear me say this a lot today, is what's the you want people to receive or feel about you or your product or your brand or whatever it is you're selling to them, right? What do you want them to feel? And then when you can understand what that feel looks like, you can start to focus on the result and the output of it. So what makes a brand unforgettable? It's the delivery, it's the experience, it's the emotional connection that you can create between you and your customer.
Hmm. I have a follow-up question to that. Speaking of liquid death, that all makes sense, by the way. That is such an interesting product to bring up because I first encountered liquid death at a music festival in Miami years ago. And I thought, because of the design of the can, that it was some sort of malt beverage. I thought it was alcoholic. So we ordered waters, and the server cracked these in front of us. I was like, I didn't order that. What, it liquid death? I'm not drinking that. Like a Four Loko or something. And then they were like, no, it's water. So I guess my question, the brand, for me personally, I associate that brand with concerts and music festivals. I've never seen it at a grocery store. I've only seen it in music venues. And immediately now, when I see it, I know what it is. And I'm comfortable with it. When I first saw it, it was a little confusing, but clearly they're doing something right. It's a $1 billion company, as you said. How much of that impact do you think was the branding, like kind of making it look like people are drinking alcohol versus the product placement itself? Because genius of them to start distributing to music festivals, they're going to sell pallets and pallets and pallets every single night. You know what I mean? And that's like
Hmm.
kind of, I think, their niche. But
Hmm.
between the two, like, how would you introduce liquid death on the shelves at a grocery store? What, like, no one knows what that is.
Hmm. Oh, that's a great question. I think there's several variables, and not that I've studied their branding or their marketing plan too strategically, but I noticed that one of the taglines they used early on was "Murder Your Thirst," and so they were very specifically playing on a type of audience that would drink their
Uh-huh.
water. And you said something very apropos. They positioned themselves in a market where they realized there were generally people who are sort of outgoing and looking for fun. Most likely were drinkers, and most likely were energy drinkers. And if you take a look at a concert, and I go to concerts pretty regularly, if you walk around and look at the other beverages they're selling, they are selling energy drinks and they're selling alcohol.
Mhm.
And they knew they did a really steep psychoanalytical market study on who are the type of people that go to concerts and what type of stores do they shop at, and when they do shop at stores, where do they spend most of their time. And so they position themselves like an energy drink on purpose, or even a craft beer brand, because if you realize over the last basically 10 years, and Charlotte is in that same market, craft beer breweries, energy drinks have exploded. I think the number is like 6,500% from where it was 10 years ago. And that's not a made up number. 6,500% increase in breweries, craft beers, people who are sort of playing into this market of like the Gen Z, younger people who have some money. And we have a lot of people have a lot of money to spend, so they're playing off that market and they price it accordingly. So they position themselves like an energy drink on purpose because they did want people to be confused. But then once they got confused, Murder Your Thirst is sort of like, wow, we're playing off people's emotions. This cool drink, this cool can I'm holding. And if you look at their branding, it has like this really rebellious message on it. And so their sort of positioning was, and if you look early on, if you go back and look at the concerts that they were generally playing early on, it was generally a heavier metal and a heavier rock type of audience, because they realized the type of people that go to those concerts were the type of people that would really resonate with like this murder your thirst concept. So that's what they played off of. And in terms of like going back to your question, I don't know that there is one right way to brand versus how you label and who your audience is. I think it's probably more important to know who your audience is and the solution you're trying to deliver to that audience, and then design forward from that perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. I think kind of like an overall arching lesson in this whole thing is like if you're trying to market your product and you're worried about the market being oversaturated, like there's millions of bottled water companies. If I was
Hmm.
trying to enter the market into just standard grocery stores, I'm competing against Fiji water and like
Hmm.
big names that have clean brands.
Hmm.
But I don't think anybody really thought about the music festival concert niche before that, because anytime I had ordered water before, it was just whatever like local
Hmm.
generic brand bottle they had.
Hmm.
So I think it's pretty interesting.
They did something else that was kind of interesting as well, is they actually reversed or flipped the category around, because if you go to water aisles, typically they're basic clear bottles, they're blue, they're white, and they always have like this purity messaging on it. And Liquid Death came and said, F that, we're coming in with heavy metal, we're gonna have bold type fonts,
Yeah.
we're gonna have these tall boy cans that look like beers. And it really kind of became like a counterculture branding category for them. And
Mhm.
so that's how they created what most branding experts will call a movement. They literally created a culture around this rebellious idea and something that was antithetical to the typical water market. So it really stood out. And because if you see the font, I have that glorious like cursive manuscript on it. It's sort of like, wait, what is that? That looks kind of cool. It does look like a craft beer. So yeah,
Mhm.
they fooled
Yeah,
us all.
it did. I was confused. I was like, I didn't order that, but you did.
I do remember the first time, yeah, seeing one, but I think I got mine at a brewery. So that's
Uh-huh.
a
Yeah.
lot of where I see them. Yeah. And I actually think they probably do sell them now in like Targets and stuff like that, right? Like in a 4-pack, kind of
Hmm.
like you would sell beer or seltzers or whatever. It's very smart. It's
Yeah.
like they're I don't know, very, very creative. So I'm glad you brought that up. Wow, $1 billion. Good for them.
Amazing, right? That's all. That's everyone's pipe dream here. Over, I think that's all of us can say. We get valuated for $1 billion.
Yeah.
We've
You
made
know,
it,
you're
Mom. I
doing
made it,
good.
Mom. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mom, look at me.
That's funny. Cool.
Oh, next
Okay, so we're
question,
gonna say something.
Chelsea.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna say something. All right. Can you share a story of a rebrand or a brand glow up that completely changed the game for a business?
A brand glow up. I've got a lot of cool stories to share. I know we're time sensitive, so I think one that comes to mind is somebody I'm working with in the last year or so. He was a chiropractor and traditional guy, very conservative background, and he sort of was positioning himself. And this was my language to him. He just positioned himself as a back pain mechanic, sort of. He was just here to fix backs. He was a chiropractor in every sense of the word. And speaking of Liquid Death, he sort of went about his approach very anti-establishment as it pertained to the medical industry. Because if you know the history of chiropractors in the medical industry, they've been fighting head to head since the inception back in 1920s, 30s. And so he really latched onto this whole idea of like, I'm rogue, I'm rebellious, I'm not in the medical establishment, I'm going to treat people. But he only really talked about the fact that he was not the medical establishment and he was just here to fix backs. But a lot of times people don't realize that your back problems stem from something much deeper. And if you really sit and talk to a chiropractor, they'll tell you, oh, back pain is just sort of the output of the input. And back pain can yield from, you have misaligned hips, or your diet is poor, or you're not getting enough exercise, or you're not getting enough sleep, and all of these things, because your backbone is literally the foundation of our bodies. They take on all that energy. And so the more I sat and talked with him and going through brand discovery with him, I realized that he wasn't necessarily fixing backs. He was getting people back on their feet and enabling them to live a fuller, more creative life, because a lot of the people that he was seeing were sort of at their last straw. The doctors were telling them surgery is the only option, or they had been hospitalized, and some of them were in wheelchairs, some of them were barely able to take 10 steps. There was one time when I was at his office where one of the patients had to literally be wheeled into his office. And so it dawned on me what he was really doing was a transformation. He wasn't just fixing people's backs, he was getting them back on their feet. And so, this whole idea of chiropractic care you can trust, which was his tagline, we switched that around to get back to what moves you. And so, everything that we did was centered around movement and getting back. Like, just imagine if all of us were crippled from back pain, what that does to our bodies. I can speak from experience. I played soccer for the first time in 2.5 years on Sunday, and I could barely move the next day. But that was just like a temporary thing, right? So imagine if your entire life centered around not being able to play with your kids or go to the water park or go to the gym or take simple walks with your wife or your husband or whatever the case may be, this idea of movement that we take for granted. And when you really start to speak to people's pain points. Again, I'm not saying you have to be conspiratorial or like doom or gloom, but if you have a solution that you want to bring to an audience, right, it behooves you to figure out what's the solution going to do for them. Don't just talk about the solution. Don't talk about, hey, I have really cool water. Give them a reason to drink water to make them feel like a badass rebel and murdering my thirst. So the whole idea is around creating a situation where the end user or the customer you're trying to sell to can take a look at what you're delivering to them and be like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was looking for. And they may not even know it. Sometimes it's unconscious and it's like on a subconscious level. But again, the more you can speak of the result and the outcome from your service, as opposed to this is what I do, the more people are going to line up because there are people who need your solution, whatever it might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, it makes total sense. And this wasn't on our question list, but it just kind of made me think as you're explaining how you worked with that. Can you kind of walk us through like a high level what your process is like when you're working with somebody on how to get their brand story out of them? Like I'm sure you had multiple conversations with him and that kind of came out of those, but what does that typically look like?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. It's actually a very rigorous and structured process that I've been creating over the years. It's basically a branding blueprint exercise that I take you through.
Oh.
It's generally about 3 days of hardcore workshop with me, and these are like 4 to 6 hours each. So you'll come down to the office or down to the studio, or I'll go to your office, and I use part psychology. I do a lot of customer avatar work. We do a lot of internal work, sort of understanding how you are. Are you familiar with the concept of enneagrams?
I don't think so.
So Enneagrams, human design, they're sort
Oh
of,
yeah.
yeah. So we all sort of have this. If you think about yourself for a minute, right? So each one of us, the four of us that are in this a meeting right now, we all have our own unique upbringing, right? We have our own. We had our own parents. We had our own experiences. We have our own learned behaviors. We went to our own schools. We had our own unique types of friends. We had our own failures. We had our own victories. And all of these things, if you start to look at them in a visual diagram, you would see they become layers, one after the other, of the context of our perception and how we view ourselves and how we view others and we show up in the world, right? Well, sometimes those perceptions that we have aren't accurate or they're skewed or they're based on trauma. I was in that bucket. I realized that early on I had a type of perspective around certain things in the way I showed up, and I realized that there was some trauma induced perspectives that were being sort of created by something I had never addressed before. So, like, I have I had a therapist. I have several coaches that I work with, and in the process of really uncovering who you are as an individual and how you show up in the world, you can start to see the gaps, right? And those gaps are what cause confusion, whether it's building our own business, how we build relationships with people, all these different things. And so I went back to school to really better understand how do people show up. I have a psychology background, so I've always been fascinated with psychology, and really just kind of dove into how can I take a person's psychology, person's psychometrics, all the things that they believe, and how does that correlate with how they run their business? So think about yourselves for a minute. So, Casey, you have a very specific perspective on how you view humans, whether it's a positive perspective or a negative perspective. Sarah, she's very, very optimistic all the time. No matter what the situation is, she's like, there's a happy outcome. And I don't know how I'm sorry, you're not Nichole, but I forgot your name. I'm horrible with names.
Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Chelsea, sorry. You got to change that for me. So
I
Chelsea,
know.
you have a very, very specific perspective of, I heard you mention at the outset of the conversation, your husband. So there was a very specific type of man that you were looking for when you got married. Maybe you didn't know it, but it was subconscious. But all of those things are framed on beliefs based upon your 30, 40 years on the planet, right? And so during the brand discovery, I promise I'm going somewhere with this. During the brand discovery, we actually go into the human design aspect of who you are and how you view yourself and how you view the world. Because once we can understand what that is and we start working on the personal level of who you are, then we can better understand how we can align that with the professional side and how you show up in your business. So how you view people, how you view society, how you view the planet, how you view customer service, how you view technology, whatever it is. My mother used to say, "I'm never going to use the internet, Devi," and like I'm never. And so old people always got this reputation for like we're never going to embrace internet. Well, if you're not going to embrace internet in today's day and age, you're not going to have a business. But that was a perspective you had. So if you can take a look at these perspectives and then understand how that is going to manifest itself in your professional world, then we can better design something that will be better fitting to what you want to ultimately build. So all that starts with a lot of psychology work, and this is the long and short of it. It's part psychology. It's literally part therapy. It's a part understanding the gaps. What do you want your business to look like? And then we spend a lot of time on, okay, what's the problem you actually solve, right? So what do you do for business, Chelsea? What's your ultimate business every day?
My husband and I own a mortgage company.
Okay. So when you and your husband are working with an ideal type of client, there's a couple of things. There's obviously somebody you really love working with, I'm assuming, right? That if you could paint a picture and wave your magic wand, and I give all my clients a magic wand when they work with me, if you could wave this magic wand, what would your perfect customer look like? What would they
Oh
drive?
boy.
Where do they live? How do they make you feel? There's a judgment you have or an expectation you have around them, right? And so when you can look at their perspective, and this is what we do in all of this brand discovery, is we take a look at our customer. What do they need out of this situation? What problem are we going to solve for them? And how can we uniquely deliver that message to them? And so it's part avatar, it's part customer perception, it's part customer journey. There's just a whole bunch of different things that go into it. And what you get is you get this codex at the end. It's literally like your Bible. And anything you need to know about who you are as an individual and how your business operates and the problems you solve, they're all literally outlined in this codex so that you have sort of a frame to turn to whenever you're trying to build something. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense. And I think that kind of ties into this overarching message that we've had throughout this entire branding series is how do you authentically operate in your business? And I know that's like a co-opted buzzword right now, authenticity, but it is true. And every single person that we've talked to, when we ask that, what is the most important thing in being an entrepreneur when you're trying to brand who you are and get your message out? And I swear every single person says be authentic. And I don't think a lot of people realize how you come to that kind of end game conclusion of how do I express my authenticity. A lot of it probably is psychology, and people don't realize, like, when you're creating a brand, you're not just creating what you think looks cool that day or might be trendy. Like, if it's going to be successful, it really has to reflect who you are as a person, or people aren't going to buy it. And you just kind of gave like the entire backstory as to why that works, which is super
Mm.
fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. If you stop to think about just yourself as a consumer, think about today, and you can do this as a really fun journal exercise. Start making a list today of everything that you interact with, whether it's at the grocery store, whether it's your take to your car dealership to get your car serviced or get it cleaned, whatever it is, and make a list of all the things that you did today that involved you interacting with somebody that wasn't part of your family bond, right? And when you make this list, you sort of, at the end of the day, you'll realize that you have a lot of touch points. You went to your fridge and you picked up your favorite milk, or you opened up the drawer and you went walked to the pantry and you have a favorite pasta that you use, whatever it is. Like, I'm just sort of using examples here, but you have something in your house or in your ecosystem every single day that you touch, use, play with, interact with, have an experience with. And if you just start to journal these, it's a really cool cathartic exercise, because at the end of the day you'll be like, okay, I did this, I wore my Lululemon pants to yoga because it's the only pants that I really feel comfortable in. I had my Stanley cooler because I just really feel cool with my gray metallic Stanley cooler. I ate at Chick-fil-A because, Chick-fil-A says they're healthy, whatever it is, right? You have these like concepts in your mind, these judgments that you've made, these perceptions that you've made, right? And your perception is your reality. It's different from mine, but it's different from Sarah's, but it's your reality. And so if you think about all the things that you consume, all the things that you use, there's some sort of a bond that was created with them. And then if you take some notes on like, what is it that I love about Lululemon? Well, they always show really attractive women and really attractive men wearing them, and I subconsciously just want to look like them. Or why did I do this? Or why did I use that? Why do I drive a Mercedes over? There's always something that tugged at you emotionally. And then if you really start to go back to the root of that, you'll realize that there was something that brand did to make them stand out. And it wasn't about their logo. It wasn't about their, well, it wasn't when I don't know if y'all remember, you're not old enough, I don't think. I think I'm the oldest one in the room. But remember when I was in high school, I went to a really poor school in California, and the big deal was to break logos off of Mercedes Benz and then put them as a chain around their neck. And so people were always like strutting around high school with the Mercedes Benz that they had just knocked off the neighborhood somewhere. But they did that for a variety of reasons. They felt part of a tribe because everyone else was doing it. Mercedes Benz at the time was like the premier car. This was before Teslas. This was before Range Rovers were big. Mercedes Benz was like the centerpiece of like I've arrived, right? And so these boys, mostly, there were a couple of girls who did it too, but mostly boys, they would go out all around the town and they'd find these Mercedes and they'd rip off. I don't know if you remember, Mercedes used to have the logo. It had like a bendy thing on it and it sat at the top of the hood. And they would rip it off and they'd put it around their neck and they'd wear it. And I always was fascinated by the fact that a culture was basically created around this. And Mercedes, if you go back and look at Mercedes, and I'm going to date myself, this was in the early 90s. If you go look at some of Mercedes branding and what they did in their commercials, you'll see they were basically creating an emotional bond between you've arrived and culture and money and you and your journey. And if you drive a Mercedes, you're part of the cool club type of thing. If you look at all their commercials, you'll see that. And they did some really cool stuff. Like this one time they had this guy driving in a car and he was like a old Mercedes, and this other car pulls up next to it, and it's like this souped up like sports car, and he's gassing his engine, and there's like two dudes dressed in tank tops, and they're like, yeah, like machismo, and they want to race the guy. And the guy just sort of like looks over at him. He rolls down his windows, and there's his backseat is filled with like three amazingly beautiful women, and he smiled, and his teeth say Benz on it. And he stops in his car. And it was just a really cool commercial because they were like, you can be cool and drive a Mercedes. And if you drive a Mercedes, nobody else can afford these. So, long and short of what your question was, sorry, I have a long way of getting to this, but authenticity for me is an overused word. I don't really, I mean, how would you show up on a day-to-day basis with the people you interact with, right? Are you posturing right now on this WebEx? When you go home tonight, are you posturing to your partner? When you drink liquid death at the concert tonight, are you posturing to your friends? No, because people can see through that, right? Our customers today are so freaking smart. We have so much information at our disposal that I can quickly Google you, YouTube you, or something else and figure out who you are. Are you a fraud? Are you real? And so being authentic, being genuine, it sells because we're so smart and we have so much information. And because we know at the heart of who we are as humans, it's a real, genuine connection. Again, you're not faking your relationships with me, I hope. If we go and have drinks tonight, I'm assuming you sort of like my company and you kind of want to hang out with me. It's not be like because you're doing it to posture or act cool because you think that I'm cool. There's something that created this a genuine aspect of who you are, and people buy genuineness. They buy realness. They don't buy your logo. They don't buy your product. They buy your voice. They buy your values. They buy your vibe. What is it that they can see in them that you have a part of them that they either want or they admire or they respect? And that's how you brand. You give up, you start talking about the things that matter to you, and you let people know your story. And in the process of telling them your story, people see resonance in it. They see identity in it. And that's how you build that culture around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I have another question that wasn't on the
You're like, that
list.
was really long. Can we get these shorter? Sorry.
No, no, no,
I'm a
no, no,
storyteller,
not at all.
remember?
This is amazing. I'm as we're talking, I'm like thinking of more things. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I have to make sure I ask this. This is kind of more just like your opinion. I don't know if this is actually a thing to pay attention to or not, but I'm just curious because you brought it up twice and it definitely resonates with me and kind of my demographic with the whole like Stanley Cup Lululemon thing. I'm noticing I'm a big Pinterest girly.
Mm.
I don't spend a lot of time scrolling through social media. Like at night, I spend a lot of time scrolling through Pinterest and just looking at things I like. And I'm noticing this collage feature that's popping up. And I'm seeing it in other avenues where people are pairing things. They're not competing industries, but they are things that kind of go with a certain aesthetic. And then you see, the Amazon influencers that are making money posting product reviews, but they're saying like these 10 things will make your kitchen blah, blah, blah. So it's a lot of things that pair well together. And I'm wondering, I mean, it's kind of trendy right now, especially for females, like the whole athleisure, I'm drinking water, I'm healthy, I'm eating this and blah, blah, blah. How beneficial is it for products to insert themselves into a niche where there's already products that are not competing with them, but maybe go along with a similar trend? Or do you think it makes a difference?
So the question is, if I had a product, does it make sense for me to take my product and interweave it with another group of products that might serve as a good collaborative cornerstone for it?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that they're paying for it. I think culture's kind of doing itself, but it is kind of like this natural organism of like things are getting branded together. Like a
Yeah.
certain sneaker, Lululemon outfit, Stanley Cup. I know exactly what that person looks like in my mind if I see those three things. Is it beneficial for companies like, all right, we're making this water product. We want this type of market at our access. Should we start giving these to people or just inserting ourselves from a branding perspective with things that will go nicely with what we're selling essentially?
Hmm.
Is that on purpose? Is it I notice like trends right now, and I'm only using that as a frame of reference because we've been talking about it on this episode. But I
Yeah,
know
so that's a really good question, and let's break it down for a minute. This is a larger microcosm of what social media influencers did 5 years ago. So if you think about social media influencers, they were selling their prestige and their popularity so that you would pay them to promote your product, right? So Chelsea, if you were a high level influencer and your market was specifically in, let's say, what's something you really love doing? Let's just tell me a little about outside of mortgages. Is there something that's lifestyle based for you? Are you a foodie? Do you like cooking? Do you like gardening? What's something that you're really passionate about? That's sort of like a like a love.
probably going to the gym.
Okay, so you're a fitness buff. So you love being in fitness. And so let's say you're a social media influencer for fitness. I would contact you because I wanted your visibility. And so this collage-driven aesthetic that you're talking about from Pinterest, it all stemmed from this idea of pairing your zone of genius with somebody else's zone of genius who had greater visibility. And what it's evolved to, thanks to Pinterest, thanks to social media, and thanks to now everybody having access to create their own little world, if you will, it's created this whole idea of a visual language. So branding has evolved greatly because of social media, because what it's done is it's allowed all of us as entrepreneurs and brands to have to really hone in on their visual language, because we know that it's something like 60% greater retention, and my figures might be slightly off, but the number is something like 60% of a greater retention when somebody sees something as opposed to reading something, right? And so if you can create a visual language around what your brand does, what you're doing is you're creating a shortcut to your positioning, right? So among all the other people who are fitness social media influencers like you, there's something about your brand that's going to resonate with me or your audience. Does that make sense? And
Mhm.
so what happens when you create that is you do this, you create this concept called emotional anchoring. And this emotional anchoring with collages, for example, since that's what you use, they create a feeling around something because you're tying it into something else that had a similar feeling of an ecosystem. Does that make sense? So I love candles. I don't know why. Somewhere along the history of my life, maybe it was a former life, I got into candles. And so if I was selling candles, I wouldn't just say, "Hey, I have a really cool candle, it has nice colors, has a good scent." I could amplify has really nice linens or nice bed covering or really cool window dressings or a really cute couple laying in the bed with the candle somewhere off to the background, right? And so what happens when you create these boards, and Pinterest is just one example of that. Whenever you're tying yourself to a space or a thing or a position or a market or a product, you're increasing your appeal, even if it's subconscious, because then you're enabling other people to see subconsciously and imagination wise what that might look like for them. Does that make sense? So have you ever you're in real estate, so have you ever staged a room?
Not personally, but very familiar with that
So
side of the things.
So what do you do when you stage a room? You don't just be like, "Hey, this room's we're not just going to hire a housekeeper to come in and clean it and that's it," right? What do you do? You dress up the room, you make sure that there's accoutrements around. There might even be a fake salad bowl or a charcuterie board with a bottle of wine. There might be some candles over in the corner. There might be I don't even know. I worked with an interior designer before, and she would literally bring in like a dog to lay on a big shaggy mud carpet and things like that. And the whole idea is we would
Oh,
There's a reframing of everyone's pictures. I was looking at
I got
Casey on the
kicked
bottom.
off.
yeah, I
I
did
got
too.
kicked off.
That was
It said
so.
my internet was on. Yeah.
Me too. I wonder if we're getting that big story. Yeah, it like completely booted me off. Okay.
Yeah.
I will. Well, are we good to continue or no?
Oh yeah, it's still
Yeah. I think
recording. We can
Okay.
all
edit
right.
that out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You want authenticity, leave that in. See,
There you go. I'm good with it.
see, even these experts make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm
anyway,
a big bloopers fan. That was like always my favorite part is
Uh-huh.
like mess ups. You're like, wow, they're real people. I love this. Yeah.
as long as when they get stuck in some obtuse frozen position,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always love those, right?
We'll use
Putting your
that as like the cover image.
Yeah, putting your best foot forward. Don't put me in a Pinterest grid with that. There's nothing that is
No, no,
analogous to that. So anyway, yeah, the long and short of it is I don't know that it's the right fit for everybody. I think you have to be very clear on what your brand represents. And if you did want to model yourself alongside other paragons, if you will, understanding what their image is and who they're trying to deliver themselves to. And if you feel like there's a good natural pairing for that. So if you were to do a collaboration with a financer who finances homes or maybe a stager or a designer and creating this sort of experience around your real estate service, it's not just sell your home or get your home sold. We work with you on all these different variables, and that's how I'd position myself aesthetically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and as you were saying that, it kind of reminded me, I actually did see this happen before there was like social media. When I was in high school, there were three things that every girl had to have, and it was a North Face jacket, a pair of Ugg boots, and a Vera Bradley wristlet. And that was like the trifecta. But in all those brands have nothing to do with each other, and I'm sure they never thought their likeness would be used in combination, but it was those like if you had one, you had to have the other two.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's a perfect example of that grid layout that I was talking about in terms of like product mapping. So today I look at my teenage daughter, she's 16, she's in high school. She wears sweatpants every day, big hoodies. She always has a Stanley in her hand, and she always has some like expensive fancy coffee. And it's like every one of her friends show up at the house, they're all looking, wearing, doing the exact same thing. So on a physical realm, they've done that product mapping, and whoever has sold that has said, "Hey, if you want to be a cool teenage girl, this is what you do."
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It's pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
There's so much psychology in marketing and branding. It's insane how like billions of dollars, trillions of dollars are spent every day on how can we position our product in front of the right audience so that the right perception is established. And like we can do that as small business owners even if we don't have trillion-dollar budgets. It's just really some small tweaks.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
sometimes it flops, but it is pretty interesting to see like the process behind it. And
Yeah.
I don't think that we've ever really talked about like the psychology piece. So that is very interesting, especially when it comes to like solo entrepreneurs.
hmm
Hmm.
Cool. Well, Casey, I feel like I just chewed up the whole I'm so sorry. Do you have
No, that's
anything you want?
okay.
I
It
couldn't
wasn't
stop
you, Chelsea. It
myself.
was me who chewed up all the time.
No.
I
I was
love
going
just
rapid fire.
listening and hearing all of the just the emotional aspect of it is so eye-opening and the psychology part. I mean, obviously that makes sense, right? It's you can feel when you're pulled to a certain thing. And like personally, my business, it's a women's empowerment and personal development business, and we do networking. There's a million networking groups here in Charlotte, right? They like take your pick. There's no, you know, scarcity with that. But I I hear it from all of the women that come to my events that they love mine because of the types of women that are coming and like the environment that is being cultivated, right? Like the kind of vibes that are going on in that room. And I believe it, because I have people that just keep coming back. And it's like, you just have to find your people, right? Like your ideal customer, right? Like for Chelsea with her mortgage business I'm sure her ideal person is like someone who has an 800 plus credit score and, makes $500,000 a year and blah, blah, blah. And now, is she going to get that every single time? Probably not. But I think it's so good to know, like, let me market to that person. Of course, you'll take on a little old me. I'm trying to sell my house and just had stagers in here and went through that whole experience, you guys. I was like, my house, and I have 3 little kids. So imagine how fun that was for those stagers. But I was like, this looks like a different house. Like, I don't even know how you guys did this. And it's like the bottle of wine and the 2 glasses, right? And the cute little sign in the kitchen with nothing else on the counters, And I'm
Yeah.
just like, I feel awesome. I actually don't know if I want to move now. Like it looks like a totally different house. And so that emotional connection piece is just that's the gold.
Yeah.
It's like if you can get that, who cares if you get 100 people that aren't meant for you? If you're getting the like top, 5 to 10 people that are meant for you, I just feel like you're gonna have such a much more enjoyable experience with your
Yeah.
business and what you're doing.
You're absolutely right. I mean, how many people have you worked? We're all sort of in the service industry. And how many clients have you worked with in the past that they just drained you and you dreaded the phone call, you dreaded the meeting, you're like, oh my God, somebody shoot me today that I have to do this. And then the converse of that is think about people you really enjoy being around and like, man, I
Mhm.
can't wait to serve this person. You sort of, it sounds a little bit